Hello, welcome back to the podcast. And today I want to unpack a fear that a lot of wellness experts and health practitioners have. And frankly, it's, really normal, especially when it comes to creating content, to have this fear that you're going to give too much away. And, the way this manifests is usually in thinking, I've got 5 tips I want to share, and maybe I should just share 2 of them, because if I give all 5 tips away, then what is someone actually going to pay me for? And the reason that I decided to share this in this episode is because I had a conversation with a client of mine this week, and we kind of decided to rethink our approach to this. And in our conversation, we kind of unpacked a new lens with which to view this idea of content sharing through. And so I wanted to share that with you today. And so maybe you've thought to yourself, if I share all of my knowledge online, why would anyone want to pay to work with me? Or, if I give too much away, then what will I be left to sell, or won't I be left with nothing to sell? And so I want to talk about that today, because that fear is very rational, and it's a very sensible way of thinking about things. It's logical. And what we're going to talk about today feels a little bit counterintuitive in a way, but hopefully it also makes a lot of sense. What's actually holding you back from building trust with your audience is this idea of holding your cards close to your chest, wanting to protect your intellectual property, your key information. And that is the trust that you need to build with your audience in order to consistently attract paying clients. So the conversation I had was with a highly qualified practitioner. She works in the area of skin health, and she said to me that for the longest time, when it comes to sharing content, to, creating content, she's worried that, if she gives all of her knowledge away on her Instagram posts and her Instagram reels and in her blog posts and so on, that there'll be no reason left for somebody to come and see her in her online clinic. And so where we drew a line in the sand, and I want you to think about it this way too, is that the information that you're giving away is your opportunity to build trust and recognition with your audience. It's your opportunity to develop a connection with the people who need you most, where they perceive you as somebody who knows their stuff, the go-to expert in your field of expertise. And, this practitioner was holding back in her content because she didn't have, not because she didn't have value to share, but because she was worried she'd lose potential clients if she gave away too much. So what I told her, and maybe you need to hear this too, is that information is not what people are paying for. We live in an age of infinite amounts of information. Just this morning, I jumped on ChatGPT, and I wanted to do a 20-minute workout, and I felt motivated to do it. And I told ChatGPT, I've got a skipping rope, I've got a 10-kilo kettlebell, and I've got 2 1-kilo hand weights. Can you design me a 20-minute workout? And it gave me all the information that I needed. So we're not short on information. This morning, I happened to have a load of motivation. There are a lot of mornings when I don't have motivation, and that's why I also pay a personal trainer to come to my house and to help me. And that's why people, despite all of the apps and info and free YouTube videos and workouts online available to them, still pay for that personalized accountability that comes from paying somebody to help you. And the same is true of nutrition. The same is true of any aspect of well-being. We can find all the information that we need to help us online. It's the personalization and the implementation element that somebody wants to pay for. So information is not what people are coming to you to pay you for. They are paying you for implementation. They're paying for that personalization of the information. They're paying for the confidence they feel when you tell them, this is what you need to do for your body or your mind or your energy, the support that you get around that information, and the speed of execution. Because, this morning, although I was kind of fumbling my way through my fitness plan that ChatGPT had spat out for me, I had to negotiate with the timer on my phone and the countdown timer on my phone, and then jumping back into ChatGPT to get the next bit of the workout. And I found myself, lying on my mat thinking, what's my next exercise? Having to get up, get my phone from the table. And it was clunky, so I had the information, but it would have been a lot easier for me. And in my head, what I was thinking to myself was it would be so much easier if someone was guiding me through this process. And with all of that in mind, when it comes to creating content, I want you to think about how important it is in that framework of thinking to give away value. When you give away value, you develop that sense of, credibility. You develop a reputation as being someone who shares value. And on that path, you become the person that when your ideal client thinks, right, it's time for me to get some support with this, I can't do this on my own anymore, you are the first person to come into their mind. And so, more than anything, your ideal client is paying you to help them to bridge the gap between knowing and doing. Your ideal client is paying you to help them bridge the gap between knowing and doing. And that has nothing to do with the information that you're sharing. Let me share another quick story with you to help bring this to life even more. So recently, I went on a journey with my daughter, my 6-month-old baby, on finding a solution for some recurring eczema that she has been experiencing. And, eczema in babies is really common. There are lots of potential reasons and triggers. It's kind of the billion-dollar question, what causes eczema? And there are lots of theories around it. And so I went to see a bunch of specialists because I found that there was a lot of information online and almost too much information for me to really get to the core of what was right for my child, what was the right information to apply to our unique situation, because there were so many variables in that experience. And so I booked myself an appointment to take her to see a dermatologist, a specialist. And it was an expensive appointment. It was £300 to see a consultant, a highly qualified consultant. And my feeling was that with all of the information that I had gathered, that I needed to go and sit with someone and be told exactly what we should do to care for her skin. Now, £300 is a lot of money. And honestly, when I went into the session, I was expecting to, hear something that I hadn't heard before, to be told some miracle, cure was available for us based on, our unique circumstance. And the truth is, that's not what happened. Instead, what I left with was confidence that the next steps that we were going to take were right for us. Now, those steps themselves, the information that I was given, was not new to me. I didn't hear anything in that session from an informative or conceptual perspective that I hadn't already heard before. Do this, or do this. It was more that specialist, that consultant, gave me a structured plan. And we got follow-up from that plan to check in to see how we were doing. I was able to ask questions based on, unique reactions that happened when we followed that process. And I also left feeling heard. I left feeling validated. I left feeling that it was normal for me to feel the emotions that I was feeling about my daughter's skin and the journey that we're going on. And so honestly, whilst she didn't tell me anything that I didn't already know, and so the reality is I didn't go for the information, I paid for certainty. I paid to validate that, what I suspected was the right approach, and to make sure that I was moving in the right direction with the right support, and that, that one decision that I made would be how I moved forward for months to come. And this is what your clients are doing too, okay? So when I think about, there's a final point for this story, when I think about why I chose to go and see that specific consultant, it's because when I looked at their Instagram page, when I looked at their website, the information there showed me that they knew what they were talking about. It was a no holding back approach to content sharing. It was, here are all the things you could do if your child has eczema. It's here are all the things you're worried about. It's here's all the approaches that we take with children's eczema. And that information built enough trust in me to know that when I booked that appointment and I paid that amount of money, I was going to get the right level of service and care and come away with that certainty and confidence on what the next steps were. So here's what I want you to take away from this episode. The first thing is that you cannot out-gatekeep your competition, okay? Holding back in the name of protecting your ideas or protecting your IP or, not giving away too much just slows down the process of trust building. And that's the most important thing in the wellness industry right now, is that you build trust with your audience. And the reason that's so important is because right now there is a massive trust deficit. More than ever, people struggle to believe in the promises that are being made to them online. Why? Because there are so many false promises being made. There's so much over-promising of results and outcomes. And so your sincerity is built upon a foundation of strong, valuable, highly useful, highly practical, and highly unique content. And so you can't out-gatekeep your competition. You can't protect yourself forever, and you don't need to protect yourself from the information that you're sharing. The second thing is that when you freely share valuable and insightful content, people begin to trust that you know your stuff, okay? And that's what builds demand. So in the example that I gave you, I had to wait, I think it was 5 weeks for my appointment with this particular specialist. Now, I hounded and emailed and asked for cancellation appointments because I wanted to see her sooner. And I managed to get a cancellation appointment, which was amazing. And my husband and I drove 2 hours to go and see this specialist. And so all of that is to say that that content, that value that she put out was what built that, demand in my mind for her expertise and demand in the market generally for her as an expert and a go-to expert in a particular specific field. The third thing is, the more generous you are with your knowledge, the more you prove that you are an expert worth paying for, right? I'll say that again. The more generous you are with your knowledge, the more you prove to your audience that you are an expert worth paying for. So when you're feeling like all that time I spent on that one Instagram post and nobody commented and nobody reached out, I want you to remember the long game that you're playing and that your commitment to being that person who shares a lot of value, and that you can honestly look at your Instagram posts or your Instagram content and say that is unique, highly valuable content. As long as you feel that way and you can honestly be that, you can have that level of belief in the value of your content and you keep doing it, I promise you that over time you will build that trust with your audience, with the one caveat that you are solving a specific problem, like childhood eczema, like reversing type 2 diabetes, like, managing insulin resistance, whatever it is for you. Okay, so let me flip the question for you. Think about who you buy from. Do you invest in the person who keeps their cards close to their chest? Or do you invest in the person who, whose free content already gave you a bunch of light bulb moments, a bunch of clarity, right? So people don't pay for information. They pay for your unique ability to turn that information into a transformation when you come into their paid world. So don't be afraid to give it all away, because when you do, you become the person that they trust most to help them to implement it. I hope that this has been useful. Love for you to follow along on this journey. Subscribe on whatever you're listening to this on, whether it's YouTube, Spotify, Apple, or something else. And I look forward to seeing you in the next episode.